Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to move on and look towards the West and really marvel at what London has achieved really over the past 12 months. In terms of organizations and in terms of achievements, it's a city that really has made the world sit up and take notice, especially over the last 12 months. The Olympics and the Paralympics were absolutely outstanding, and the success of the British athletes were brilliant. It's also been a year when their wait for a Grand Slam win came to an end, with Andy Murray doing all right. Understandably, being a sports broadcaster, I do get drifted a little bit here and there, and everything is brilliant except for the fact that the English team is doing brilliantly in India. We're not too kind, or we're not too receptive to that, but well done to the English cricket team as well. Right, it's all about London, it's all about opportunities, and it's all about that city, that wonderful city being the gateway to the world. May I kindly request Mr. Peter Beckingham, the British Deputy High Commissioner, to chair a discussion primarily on London being the gateway to the world. And to that extent, if I can invite Mr. Jitesh Gadia, the Senior Managing Director, Blackstone Group, London. Thank you so much, Mr. Gadia, much appreciated for your presence here. If I can also invite Mr. Chris Parsons, Chairman, India Practice at Herbert Smith Freehills, London. Thank you so much. Mr. Jitesh Gadia, if you can accept a bouquet on our behalf. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Chris Parsons is the Chairman, India Practice at Herbert Smith Freehills, London. May I also invite on stage Mr. Amit Thakur, the Director, Mergers and Acquisitions, Standard Chartered, Mumbai. Mr. Amit Thakur, thank you so much, sir. Also requesting the company of Mr. Sashank Tripti, the Leader of Strategy, PwC. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm very conscious that all of you have jobs to do to go and actually make money rather than here talk about how to make money. So my introduction is going to be extremely brief, simply to welcome the participants, and in particular our first speaker who's going to introduce the session this morning, Jitesh Gadia. He is the Senior Managing Director of Blackstone in London. He told a group of senior people from Tata last night, I don't think this is too private, that Blackstone had invested $2.8 billion in dollars in India. He comes here frequently, and he's a member of the Mayor's delegation, together with some other people who I'm sure will wish to take part in the discussion, like the head of Serco, who's also here. Jitesh knows India extremely well, and as a small aside, I should say that he was reported to be drinking with a member of the English cricket team who did rather well in Mumbai this week. But I hope he's recovered from that session enough to introduce this session. Thank you.
It's not this one, it's the previous, no. Thank you, Deputy High Commissioner. It's a pleasure to be here in Mumbai, in the very heart of India's financial and indeed commercial center. And I'm grateful to the BSE, Mr. Ramodarai, and Mr. Chauhan for hosting the Mayor and members of his delegation. I understand that actually this magnificent room here was once the physical trading floor of the exchange, and therefore a very appropriate venue for today's discussion. Now, you might have noticed that this has been a very significant week in India. Firstly, the Sensex has broken through 19,000 points, reaching a 19-month high, as Boris mentioned earlier. And perhaps less welcome for some of you in the audience, the English cricket team has achieved a historic test match win in Mumbai. And of course, all coinciding with the arrival of the Mayor of London in India last Sunday. It did occur to me that if he stayed on a few more days, then perhaps all the FDI reforms would be passed by Parliament, the government's disinvestment program would be completed, and inflation would be brought down to the Reserve Bank of India's 5% target. But sadly, we are reaching the culmination of our week-long visit to India. And as I've discovered accompanying the mayor around Delhi, Hyderabad, and now Mumbai, sharing a platform with him carries the huge risk of either being overshadowed or upstaged. Well, Boris, I'm determined to hold my own ground on this occasion. The subject of financial services in London is one which runs through my veins. Although I'm of Indian origin, I've spent 40 years in the UK and over 20 of those in the City of London with major financial institutions. Over the last 2 decades, much has changed in London, but a few things have remained constant. London continues to enjoy a world-class reputation in financial and professional services and is renowned for its deep expertise and capacity to innovate. Now, the financial crisis has no doubt tempered some of the self-confidence, but London is rightly adapting to a stricter regulatory environment, and there's rapid adjustment taking place to the new realities and norms. Above all, London's financial centre continues to embrace new talent and is arguably one of the most meritocratic sectors of the British economy. And talking of talent, this week the British Chancellor George Osborne announced the appointment of Mark Carney, the current central banker in Canada and chairman of the Financial Stability Board, as the new governor of the Bank of England. I believe this is a coup for the City of London. Mark's reputation precedes him, and he's uniquely qualified to propel London further onto the international stage and help shape the future of the financial system. To kick off today's session, I would like to touch on 3 specific points. Firstly, why the demise of the City of London is grossly exaggerated and it remains a preeminent financial centre. Secondly, explaining why using London to raise capital has some distinct advantages. And finally, offer a couple of suggestions with all due humility to the Indian government and authorities as possible action items. So let me start with the status of London. Without bamboozling you with statistics, I wanted to remind you of London's scale and international reach in financial and professional services. These sectors account for almost 10% of GDP and even more in tax receipts, employing 2 million people. There are 1,400 foreign registered firms, over 250 branches and subsidiaries of foreign banks, more than any other country worldwide. The foreign banks account for half of the $8.1 trillion of bank assets. We have the largest insurance sector in Europe, netting premium income of 200 billion. The fund management sector manages almost 5 trillion of assets across the UK, a third of which come from overseas clients. At 45 billion, the UK is the largest generator of a trade surplus in the UK. And it's not just the banks, but an entire ecosystem of financial and professional services spanning insurance underwriters and brokers, asset management, accountants, lawyers, tax experts, chartered surveyors, actuaries, exchanges, custodians, and I could go on. A cluster of self-reinforcing talent which is difficult to replicate, something which many other countries have found when trying to emulate Silicon Valley outside the west coast of America. And the most difficult advantage and feature to copy is, of course, the time zone, which places London slap bang in the middle of Asia and the Americas. Simply put, London is the brick capital of the world and the natural gateway to global markets for Indian companies. And my good friend Chris Parsons from Herbert Smith will actually be going through a case study that demonstrates this very point. My second point is on raising capital. There are 65 companies currently listed on the London Stock Exchange in different shapes or forms. Between them, their market capitalization is $186 billion, and London accounts for more than half of all capital raised by Indian companies over the last 2 years. Listing venues such as AIM in London have historically provided an attractive venue for Indian companies, and I wanted to explain why. Number one, London provides access to a deeper pool of capital. UK and Europe are populated by larger investors who manage significant insurance and pension fund assets. As you saw on some previous slides, almost £5 trillion are managed in the UK, almost 5 times the size of the Indian economy. Number two, the listing requirements on AIM are less onerous, and you can raise capital as a relatively new company or even a single project. A good example is the Noida toll bridge listed on AIM. Number three, growth companies in India need to tap equity capital multiple times, not just on a one-off basis. The window for raising capital is often shut more frequently in volatile emerging markets rather than in more mature markets. And number four, there is a broader and more sophisticated range of investors in UK and Europe capable of taking the time and the effort to understand Indian companies that might be operating in specialist or niche sectors. So it's perhaps no coincidence that many of the Indian companies on AIM are focused on sectors like Bollywood or renewable technologies. Turning to my third area for discussion, I wanted to offer a couple of suggestions for the Indian government and authorities to explore, and perhaps Mr. Ramodarai, wearing another of his multiple hats, could convey these to his cabinet colleagues. The first suggestion is to consider using the international markets, particularly London, to implement the Indian government's ambitious disinvestment program. Allowing PSUs to list internationally should reduce crowding out of the private sector Indian companies, and also mean that they could be sold at a higher valuation for the benefit of Indian taxpayers. This could be in the form of direct listing or even an exchange-traded fund pooling multiple PSUs, which is an innovative proposal brought forward by the ministry earlier this year. The other suggestion is to allow Indian companies to list directly overseas. This would provide fast-growing companies with greater choice of sources of funding and avoids the requirement to double list and set up offshore holding companies and the associated tax leakage. In conclusion, I wanted to make one final point. If you believe that demography determines destiny, then India, with more than half its population under the age of 25, is the ultimate place to capture the benefits of scale, consumption growth, and capital formation on a magnitude unrivaled in human history. I hope I've convinced you that London's financial centre can be a genuine partner to help all of you exploit this unique opportunity. Thank you, and I look forward to the interactive discussion.
Jitesh, thanks very much indeed. Our next speaker is Chris Parsons, who runs the Indian practice of Herbert Smith. He also lectures at a number of Indian colleges. He lectures in law around India, which he said that some of his partners were a little surprised initially that he wished to do, but he's actually secured business as a result of this. Chris will give a presentation about the takeover by Bharti Airtel of the African telecommunications company. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Peter, Mayor of London. I'm going to tell you a story today, which is Bharti's acquisition of Zain Africa for $10.7 billion, and I hope through that story we'll demonstrate some of the partnership features of the way London has been able to work with India to help India achieve its goals around the world. I chair the India practice of Herbert Smith Freehills, an international law firm, and I spend about 2 weeks a month here in India. After today, I'm going to Bhopal, as Peter mentioned, to lecture at the National Law School there. I've never been to Bhopal before, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So let's start with the Bharti story. This extraordinary story started in 1976 when Sunil Bharti Mittal, first-generation Indian, started the Bharti Enterprise Company making cycle parts in 1976 when he was 18 years old. It was only in 1995 that the telecoms business was started. That was just 17 years ago. And in that 17 years, Bharti's become the biggest telecoms company in India and the 5th biggest telecoms company in the world. How did it achieve that extraordinary growth and extraordinary positioning within the world? And it's partly through the Bharti partnership model. Sunil Bharti Mittal and the leadership team at Bharti revolutionized the telecoms industry, particularly in emerging markets, by deciding they couldn't do it on their own. They had to do it in partnership. So customer support they did with IBM and FirstSource. IT support with IBM. How did it provide the telecoms towers? It shared them with its competitors. How did it deal with the telecoms networks? It partnered with Nokia, Ericsson, and Siemens. This at the time was absolute heresy. Who on earth in their right mind would want to give away control over such important parts of their business? But Sunil and the senior leadership team realized that if they wanted to roll out a business to India quickly, cost-effectively, efficiently, they needed to do it in partnership. And that's exactly what they did. But if they were going to continue with that growth story, that extraordinary growth story, they needed other markets to develop into. And that's where Africa came in. There were many attractions of Africa. Like India, it had a very interesting demographic profile. 70% of Africans are under the age of 25. It had a large population, like India. There are 1 billion people there. And the idea was that Bharti would roll out its partnership model in Africa, applying the lessons that it had learned in India to make a successful telecoms business in that country. There were some drawbacks for Africa, though. There were different countries, different governments, different languages, although that's actually a feature of India as well, different currencies, different fiscal regimes. The other issue with Africa was that even though there were 1 billion people in Africa, they were rather more spread out than in India. And as you can see from the slide here, and this is to scale, there are 1.2 billion people in India and 1 billion people in Africa. So there was an issue in relation to the density of population. That is correct. I think a lot of people often think that India and Africa are perhaps much closer in terms of geographic size, but as you can see, they're not. So what about the deal itself? $10.7 billion for the acquisition. It was the biggest emerging market deals in history. It was 15 countries across Africa. A memorandum of understanding was signed between Bharti and Zain in the Middle East on the 15th of February 2010. Now this was the remarkable piece. Just 6 weeks later, Bharti had done commercial, financial, accounting, legal due diligence, had negotiated the entire deal, and had agreed legal documentation to deliver that deal for the Bharti Group. That, in my experience, was completely unprecedented. It normally takes longer than 6 weeks to buy an apartment, whether in Bombay or in London. And the deal was closed then once the conditions had been satisfied on the 8th of June 2010. This slide, I hope, gives you some idea of the scale of the matter facing Bharti. So you had 15 countries across Africa. Zain was the market leader in 10 of those countries. It was the second market leader in 4 of those countries. And the African countries involved were from Sierra Leone on the west coast through to Madagascar on the east of Africa. This slide gives you a sense of some of the work streams involved, where London worked closely with Barty to deliver that deal within 6 weeks. There was some very tricky public litigation in Nigeria. Nigeria was the most important part of the business, and we were able to work with Barty to identify the difficulties arising from that litigation and what protections Barty needed in the legal documentation. There was, shortly after the MOU was signed, a military coup in Niger, being one of the countries in which Zain had a business. Now, the previous regime had revoked the telecoms license for Zain in Niger. Post the military coup, the new government reinstated the telecoms license. In my experience, that was the first time that a military coup had ever been helpful to a cross-border transaction. And what this slide seeks to do is to demonstrate a whole bunch of areas where London was able to partner with India to help Barty achieve its goals on this transaction. Whether it was structuring the transaction, so you had Barty with a holding company through Singapore into the Netherlands, buying 15 subsidiaries across Africa. Whether it was project managing, we had to put together 15 different due diligence reports from all the African lawyers, present those to the Barty leadership team in their offices in Vasant Kunj in a form that Barty found helpful and informative and was able to enable it to make decisions in relation to the transaction. We were able to help, I hope, on some of the cultural sensitivities. When around the negotiating table did yes mean yes and no mean no? And also the particular Indian angle of understanding how the promoter-led culture was relevant to and impacted on the deal. So what about from the client's perspective? This is what Sunil Bharti Mittal had to say in relation to the transaction. He said, "This agreement is a landmark for the global telecom industry and a game changer for Barty. More importantly, this transaction is a pioneering step towards South-South cooperation and strengthening of ties between India and Africa. With this acquisition, Bharti Airtel will be transformed into a truly global telecom company with operations across 18 countries, fulfilling our vision of building a world-class multinational." So in summary then, ladies and gentlemen, what we had here was a partnership between India and Africa, a partnership built on the Barty model of doing business, a partnership between Barty and its advisors, both in India and in London, and I hope a good example of how India can partner with London in helping India deliver its goals across the world. Thank you very much indeed.
Chris, thank you very much. This is the moment when my team here are going to get into a complete spin because we have decided, the Mayor and I, that the order they had proposed is actually wrong. So we're now going to throw the session open to questions, and the Mayor will finish off at the end. Sorry, Chris, it's thrown you into a spin.
I apologise. We're very fortunate that...
No, I'm going to introduce...
You're going to do,
yeah,
you're going to do the video.
Oh, okay. You watch? No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're very fortunate that Barty have very kindly produced a short video for us, commenting on some aspects of the transaction. Now, as many of you will have seen, the senior Barty team are actually on an IPO roadshow at the moment for the Infratel IPO, so they can't be with us. But Manoj Kohli, who's the boss of Barty International, has recorded a video from Nairobi in Kenya. He recorded that on Monday, and I hope that we'll be able to show you. It's just a 3-minute clip. We'll be able to show you that now.
Okay. Thanks. No, sure.
Good morning and welcome to Mr. Boris Johnson to India, and all the friends in the audience too. My name is Manoj Kohli. I am the CEO International and Joint Managing Director of Bharti Airtel, and I am calling in from Africa. In this deal, which is Zain Bharti deal, Akhil Gupta, my colleague, and I led it jointly. And this was surely a transformation deal for India. Because in terms of size, $10.7 billion, it was one of the largest for the country. But truly, it was targeting an Indian company, Bharti Airtel, to become a global corporation in the years to come. As Zain covered 15 countries in Africa, which Bharti took over. The key characteristic of this transaction was both speed and quality. We signed the deal, the MOU, in mid-February, and within 6 weeks, by March, we completed the agreement, which must be one of the records. And then within next 8 weeks, we closed all the definitive agreements, all the due diligence, and this was all possible because of fantastic support we got from partners in London. The partners were Herbert Smith, who were our legal due diligence partners, Standard Chartered, who are key lead bankers, and of course Barclays, who were part of the consortium. All these partners helped us with great amount of proactive preparation and planning for due diligence, because we did not have experience of such a large deal of M&A, so they helped us understand how systematically we have to go into due diligence, how systematically we have to go through the legal risks and other proactive risks which we need to deal with. The responsiveness of these partners was extraordinary. I'll say always, within 24 hours, these partners responded and completed our queries, questions, concerns, and that experience was delightful. The financing of the deal was completed in time, so we were able to pay $10.7 billion in time. And more importantly, the legal due diligence, which actually mitigated all the future risks of the company. I can say after 2 years of the deal, were taken care very well by these partners. I'm sure many Indian companies will utilize these partners and advisors from London for future M&A deals like Bharti Zain, which will definitely lift Indian corporations to a global orbit. At the end of the day, the deal is completed, and now for 2 years we have been running operations in Africa. And let me tell you, we have brought in Indian brand of Airtel into 17 countries of Africa now, and we are leading the market, we are gaining market share, we are innovative, we are definitely running faster than any other telecom company in Africa. The final objective of this deal, which we are still moving towards, is to make Bharti Airtel a global corporation, a global organization, and a global brand.
Chris, thanks very much. I'm sure everyone noticed the plug for your firm, amongst others, in the interview. Thank you very much. We have, as I said, 2 other participants in the panel, one of whom was mentioned, the company, Standard Chartered, but also PwC, and they would both just like to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll throw it open to questions and answers.
Thank you. And Boris, privileged to welcome you in this rotunda, which is the epicenter, I would argue, of the city and the country for commerce and enterprise. My brief remarks are related to what has happened with Bharti since that acquisition. Clearly, the reason this deal has been successful is because companies like Bharti, and there are many others, Godrej and others, are taking business models which are successful, prevalent, and in some ways able to deal with the complexity of countries like Africa and Indonesia. And in doing so, we as a firm are taking enormous help from London, our partners there, and the US, in making sure that not only the 14 countries that Bharti is plowing into, now 17, are successful, but we are bringing the full force of our London practice to that relationship. This is a very interesting, I would say, trailer of many similar deals to come, and I welcome that, and I also welcome the role that London has played so far in this relationship, and I'm sure will continue to do so. So I'll confine my remarks to that. Thank you again, and welcome.
Thanks very much. That was admirably brief. Thank you very much. And can I ask Amit Thakur, who is responsible for M&A with Standard Chartered, to be equally brief? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I realize brevity is a virtue that won't be lost here. First of all, welcome again, Boris. Let me say this, it wasn't helpful, everyone talking about the intensity of the deal over 6 weeks, what we did. I'm told sleep deprivation is cumulative. We're still sleeping it off. So, beyond what's already been said, and lots been said about Bharti, this is something that I must take an opportunity to underscore. The fact that more and more deals that we do, and from Standard Chartered, the bank that I represent, a lot of deals that we do are cross-border, and in a very large number of cases, we've realized that we have situations where there are a number of different nationalities of buyers, sellers, targets, advisors involved. And pretty much in all of these cases, if we have to sit back and think about where everybody is comfortable operating out of or operating in the context of, pretty much each of these roads do lead to or through London. So to that extent, I think in operations, indeed, the partnership between India and UK, and specifically London as the focal point there, and Mumbai as the focal point of business in India, have long since been established. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes for questions before the Mayor concludes the session. There are microphones, I'm assured, roving around, or at least one. Would anyone like to ask any of the panel, including the Mayor, but not questions about parking fines in London, please? Are there any questions, please? Yes, there's a gentleman there. Yeah, can you introduce yourself? Thanks.
Yeah, hi. Myself, Pravas. I'm from London. I run a company called Consulting Leaders Limited. I've just expanded to India in the name of Enterprise India. I actually also Startup Britain local champion for e-link. So there's a lot of startup, in London particularly, they are looking to expand to India. Well, they are not multinationals. They have no resources for going global, but they have the passion and they really want to explore India, and at the same time probably take the advantage of the talents available, the talent pool available in India. So I would like to ask the question, Ms. Mayor, how we could actually do the transition, how could we revolutionize probably the technology and bring the entrepreneurs together between India and UK?
There's a microphone there, Boris, actually.
Well, I think I've had a lot of conversations with people about visas to Britain, and a lot of people have, moaned to me about the difficulties of getting them in time. But I think what would certainly be helpful would be a bit of clarity. I think people are also a little bit confused sometimes about the Indian visa application system and the business visas that they have to get. But I think what's really needed, my strong impression, is what's needed is a bit of understanding and a bit of confidence. I mean, there are plenty of examples I've seen of dynamic businesses that people have started here in India, or businesses they've brought from the UK to India. But I think what really needs to happen is we need to dispel a bit of the myth that it's difficult to get going. And what we need is not just great examples of how London can intermediate in takeovers, important takeovers like Bharti Airtel of Zain, but of course of start-up businesses coming to India and doing well. And I'll give you one, because there's a woman in my former constituency in Henley-on-Thames, which is Oxfordshire, a very lush part of Oxfordshire, in Stanton St John, a go-ahead mother of, I can't remember how many children she had, but she started up a creche in Stanton St John for the yummy mummies of that neighbourhood, and it went incredibly well, and she now has 500 subsidiaries, I think I'm right in saying, in India, where obviously there is a growth market in babies, apart from anything else. So, and therefore of working mothers. So that's an extraordinary success story. I don't think many people in Britain are necessarily aware of that, and the more we can do to publicise that kind of thing, the better.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions, please?
If there aren't any questions.
No other takers. Mr. Nair from Mumbai First, would you like to ask a question about, I'm sure you're never short of a word.
I've already had a conversation with the mayor a little while ago, but I think all can do is there is a lot that can be done between London and Bombay. As I said, I'm from Bombay First. We've been working with London First and working with your office, and there's a lot that we can build on that. I don't think there's a lot on the transport, on housing, on planning in several areas. And all I would suggest is, we might set up a small task force between the mayor's office and organization in Bombay, which we can really develop a specific agenda where we can work with between London and Bombay. Also, I'd like to just add one more, is I had the honor and privilege of helping our Home Minister of Maharashtra last year to bring to London with a 7-member delegation to see what London has done on security, London has done on counterterrorism, and what arrangements you've made for Olympics, which have went out wonderfully well. Excellent example. And our people, our ministers' eyes open when they saw what you were doing and how you were building up. And that is something which we can really build on now. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think there's a huge role for cooperation between London and Mumbai on how to bring firms to Mumbai. I know Peter Beckingham is doing a heroic job in that respect, and there's UK IBC. There's all sorts of bodies in existence. We've got here in Mumbai, we have Gautam, who works for London and Partners, who's sitting just behind you. He's the go-to guy if you're anybody sitting in this room wanting to find a way into India, has got a startup venture that you wish to export to Mumbai, then Gautam. And symmetrically, anybody who wanted to invest in London from India, go to Gautam as well. I think London and Partners is an operation that is there to deal with the traffic both ways. On terrorism and what we've done there, you can never be too careful, you can never be complacent. We did run a very, very tight ship during the London 2012 Games. There was a massive amount of preparation. Some of it was controversial, the installation of surface-to-air missiles on some houses in London, or some homes in London, which did cause a certain amount of controversy. But it had to be done, and in the end, it was extremely effective. But I know that work has been conducted between London and Mumbai about how to combat terrorist atrocities and how to guard against them. And we've taken particular note in London, as a riparian city, of the conclusions to be drawn from the awful atrocity of 2008, which of course we commemorate this week.
Thanks very much. Perhaps I could ask a question to Jitesh and to the gentleman from Standard Chartered Bank, or one or other of you to answer it. And that is, when I first came here, there was a lot of talk, as Narendra Nair will know, and indeed there was a big paper produced by an eminent Indian financial services academic, about Mumbai becoming a financial centre. I've been quite struck that, for example, in a meeting we had earlier this morning, Standard Chartered talked about the financial centres of Singapore, Hong Kong and Dubai, but Mumbai was just simply not mentioned. Would you like either of you to comment on that? You're looking as if you want to pass the ball, but why don't Standard Chartered go for... Okay, Jitesh, you can go second.
That, to my mind, is a work in progress for the system here. I think, and I speak more as an observer of the market than from internal information. There are a number of priorities financial sector is thinking about. If you really look at it, the growth, the inflation, the monetary system needs to first be in a place where you can open it up for the rest of it. There are halfway houses, frankly, and those have been discussed and debated as well. And to my mind, we would have probably reached there in a couple of years, except for the fact that the last couple of years have probably got people to refocus on some of the things which are higher up in the pecking order on that list. To my mind, it's not something which is not happening. Right. It's possibly not being spoken of as much today as it was a few years ago. Right.
Jitesh, would you like to add to that? Thank you very much.
I think perhaps why India has not been mentioned as a sort of regional financial center is that there is, quite a big and vibrant sort of domestic market, and increasingly, I think, finance from being global, because the regulatory environment is increasingly becoming more national, and I think the key aspect of moving India from effectively a domestic financial market to a more regional and global one will obviously be the opening up of key sectors, and clearly, certainly a number of London and UK-based insurance companies would certainly hope that the FDI limits will be approved, and I think that would be of great hope, great value along the path of greater profile for India as a financial centre.
Thank you. Chris, could I ask you, another issue which comes up quite frequently is the fact that you are not able to actually operate in India. That doesn't appear to have been a problem in securing what presumably was a fairly lucrative bit of business with this deal we've heard about. Would you like to comment on whether you think that is going to change and whether you think it should change? Be as controversial as you like. The British press are here, so you can give them a story.
Thanks, Peter. Look, like many markets around the world, I think ultimately it would be helpful for the legal market to liberalise in due course. But having now worked very closely in India for the last 6 years, and as I mentioned, spending 2 weeks a month here, we are permitted to operate on a fly-in, fly-out basis. We can advise on cross-border transactions, and that's much of what we want to do at the moment. And the key point, I think, from our perspective is that we've learnt to be patient, and we're happy to operate on that basis. But in due course, I think it would be in India's interests commercially to open up on the legal front, just as we've done in London and seen the advantages flowing from that in terms of the type of work that can be done and the prospects then for people within that industry to grow and develop.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, please? Yes, Narinder. One final question.
Just a comment.
Can you speak up?
Not a question, but just a comment. Can you hear? It's not really a question, but a comment. You talked about the International Financial Center some time ago. It's actually the Bombay First report, which was submitted about 5 years ago, which led to this setting up a BSE Mystery Committee. And they broadened their scope considerably, which went into a spin, and coalition politics in Delhi didn't permit that. Just to share that, not long ago, the finance minister asked me, would we resubmit that matter again? So in fact, there's a letter on my table, which is going next week to the finance minister, to at least not look at the total perceived mystery report, but look at one other areas of perceived mystery report, like making international banking operations possible from India, so which will open up a lot of opportunities.
Thanks very much for clarifying that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, can I invite the Mayor of London to finish the session? I concluded that no one ever would want to speak after the Mayor of London, because he's simply a brilliant speaker, as you will now hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to everybody for waiting to the end of this this very interesting session. We've had a wonderful time here in Mumbai, where I've been able to catch up with representatives of my my Indian family, and of course I was reminded of the Indian light bulb dance that I like to do when I get invited to those family weddings. You know, light bulb, motorbike, motorbike, which is how I was trained to do it. I've met the England cricket team, as Jidesh has already pointed out. Jidesh was carousing with them to an early hour, and it's absolutely correct to say that the fortunes of the team did improve dramatically. The man with the Ramblers tie over there, very good to see. The fortunes did improve dramatically when this delegation arrived. I've also met a real live Bollywood film star called Kajol. I'm afraid I'd never previously been aware of her work, but she was cajoled into having a photograph with me, and she was kind enough to say that she loved London and it was a wonderful place to make movies. But I also met a young woman the other night, 32 years old, I think she said, and she was going to in exactly the opposite direction. She was coming from London to live and work in Mumbai, and she's the child of Indian immigrants to London in the 1960s, along, of course, with, she's an example of many, many others in our city, she told me, who are going the other way, grew up in England, have a British passport, educated in England, think in an entirely British way, but are going to Mumbai and are going to live here in the emerging superpower of the global economy. And frankly, you can see her point, can't you? Because you've got tax rates here of only 30%, I think a point that George Osborne might like to brood on. 10% for freelance income. 10% for freelance income, she said. And of course, a market, as we've just been discussing, with about 600 million people under 25, including, as we've just discussed, all those potential occupants of the creches of my former constituent from South Oxfordshire, liberating their mothers to spend more time driving or being driven in the backs of British-made, beautiful, luxurious, much nicer than BMW Jaguar cars. An example of a product made in Britain, but a company now owned in India. But when you look at the scale and the pace of what's happening here in India, the only real surprise for me is that British exports and partnerships aren't growing faster. I think everybody understands the difficulties, particularly when their growth has been slowing, the difficulties of making the campaign, making the pitch for more openness. And you'll have seen some of the discussion we're having in Britain, the willful misunderstanding that there is in Britain of what I think is a very reasonable attempt to make sure that talented potential students can get the visas they need to study at UK universities, or that Indian business people can come to London in the way that they need and get on and bring jobs and growth to the capital. It's a very easy argument to make, but it's also capable of being misunderstood. And so it's vital, I think, that we make the arguments, as Jitesh has earlier on, for openness in India as well. And I'm thinking of insurance, where if you can cut the premiums for insurance, for medical insurance, for household insurance, then that will be of great value to Indian households on low incomes, because you'll after all liberate more of their income to be spent on other forms of consumption. The same, it's good for them, good for the economy more widely. You can make the same point about multiple brand retail. Cheap food with less anxiety about vagaries in price is after all going to be good for people on low incomes. Or you might mention legal firms. I've seen there's been absolutely no detriment to London whatever in opening up to American law firms, for instance, setting up in London. It hasn't done any damage whatever to the legal profession in our city. It hasn't meant the displacement of local talent by America. On the contrary, what you see is bright young lawyers in London working for American firms. And that's frankly how I see the future. I see companies and organizations, British and Indian, that are no longer straitjacketed by one national identity. And I've mentioned the example of Jaguar already. You could look at JCB, which is British-owned company making JCBs in India and exporting them in growing numbers to Africa. What Infotech, for instance, is devising the signaling, the logic of the signaling that we need for the London Underground. It's thanks to an Indian company that the Jubilee line is now running 3 miles an hour faster than it was when I was elected 4 years ago. It may even be faster than that, may even 6 miles an hour faster by now, thanks to the work being done by a firm in Hyderabad. Or look at Serco. Alpna is here from Serco in India, but a London-based firm that has just won a contract to run the buses in Indore. And in a transnational environment, value will be added wherever the talent, the skills are. And that value will be dependent on being open to those talent and to talent, and also, of course, to investment. And somebody was kind enough to mention you were kind enough to mention the London Olympics, which did go well, I think. Did anybody watch the Olympics? Did you enjoy them more or less? I thought they were about as good as they could possibly have been, and a lot of the doubters and a lot of the skeptics were completely routed by the Olympics. Every tube train seemed to perform brilliantly, thanks, as I say, to the good work of the wonderful technicians of Hyderabad and elsewhere. The buses ran on time. Every athlete, every politician, every journalist got to their venues on time, more or less. Team GB did brilliantly. India did better than ever before in the medals table. But the most wonderful thing, or from an Anglo-Indian perspective, the most interesting thing about the Olympics was, after all, the symbol of the game. Did anybody actually see the shots of our Olympic Park? Can you remember what it looked like? There was a big object in the middle of the Olympic Park. Do you remember what it was? It was this huge spiral, curly-whirly, kind of mangled trombone-looking object in red metal. It was a very, very beautiful object called the ArcelorMittal orbit. And that orbit is, after all, a symbol. It's a symbol of the fusion between London and India. Not only financed by an Indian steel firm, but also, of course, designed by a Mumbai-born artist. What could be a clearer sign of welcome from London to India? And I think it's absolutely bizarre, frankly, that right now the French government, as I pointed out earlier in the week, the French government is now calling for the very firm that financed that investment, quite rightly took the decision to invest in London, 19 million quid they put in to build that wonderful tower, which we've all observed and admired. The French government is now calling for that firm to leave France. And I repeat my message to all Indian investors: oscillating as between France and England, between London and Paris, I say, come to London. Come to London, or venez à Londres, I should say. Come to London. Don't hesitate. Don't wait for the socialist terror of Monsieur Hollande to cut you off. Don't wait for the sans-culottes of Paris to denounce you. We will make you welcome. And I'm absolutely thrilled to hear this story of how London played this integral role in bringing together Bharti Airtel and Zain. And that is what we do in our city, because in spite of the difficulties the financial sector has faced over the last 4 years, we still have the largest financial sector anywhere in the world. 320,000 people employed in that business alone, pullulating with ideas to bring together companies and to generate investment in growth industries. That is what London is able to do for you. But not only do we have that, we have so many other amenities and attractions as well that make London a fantastic place to live. We have the cultural and creative scene. Twice as many bookshops as New York, more museums than Paris. I think I'm right in saying more Michelin-starred restaurants than Paris. There's someone corrected me on that fact recently. We better check that one. But almost as many Michelin-starred restaurants as Paris, my friends, and less rainfall than Rome. And it's no wonder, therefore, that just in the last few days, in the course of this wonderful trip, which we've, I think, all enjoyed so much, we have welcomed to London, or we've been able to announce the arrival in London of 2 Indian IT companies establishing themselves because of this incredible cluster of high tech that you're seeing in London. 40,000 people now employed in the tech sector in London, more than any other European capital. 2 hotel groups have announced that they are going to be investing in London, including, I'm delighted to say, an investment in a building that I've often wondered what was going to happen. Right by City Hall, there's an old red brick school building, and I look at it the whole time and wonder who on earth is going to do something with that. And I come to India, and I discover to my joy that an Indian hotel chain is going to be converting that into a wonderful hotel, bringing jobs, bringing growth to the London economy. We've heard of a rising Indian university, Amity, that wants to spend up to £100 million on a new campus of 15,000 international students in London. And today, at this historic Bombay Stock Exchange, the oldest in Asia, at the very moment when, as I said earlier on, you have attained a 19-month high, we welcome 2 growing Indian financial institutions, Axis Bank and India Bulls Financial Services. Are they here today? No, there they are. Thank you very much. I thought you were in London already. Thank you very much for your wisdom and your confidence, which is justified because there are, after all, already 73 Indian companies listed on the London Stock Exchange, and it is in London that more than half of the international equity raised by Indian companies is generated. My friends, I'm going to wind up with this thought that London has benefited from openness ever since our city was founded by a bunch of pushy Italian immigrants in the 1st century AD. And I'm grateful for the investments that Indian companies are making in London, I hope, and I'm proud and thrilled to see the symmetrical achievements and success of British firms here in India. It is my belief that it is by being open to talent and to investment that both London and Mumbai will flourish in the decades ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Boris Johnson was hoping for a bit of a reference to Paris, but it was as direct as it can get. Thank you so much once again. It was a pleasure having you in India. Thank you so much for talking about the relationship that these 2 countries have enjoyed. Thank you also to Mr. Peter Beckingham. Much appreciated for you.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. You will get ready to walk on this. Go and catch his arm. Go and catch his arm. Yeah, watch out. Okay. Okay, Boris, you can go walk. Grabbing it. Grabbing the pigeons.
On your right. Boris,
Come on. One for the bridge. Okay. Get it?
Boris. Down here.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, jump down. And if you want to be hearing about Bombay and easier time for me to explain Bombay from top, but I think we're running late. This is the tallest building in town.
Is it really?
Yeah, so you can see Bombay from top, but
Bye, folks. See you.
See you.
Bye.